Hello out there. I would like to begin by thanking the staff and volunteers for organizing this conference, and to each of you for answering the call to serve as the next generation of visionary, purpose-driven leaders. Together, we are here from across the country, from diverse backgrounds and experiences, in a shared space, so we can step into our leadership and build. My own journey has brought me from the grassroots to Capitol Hill, from Georgia to New York, and from an orphanage where I began my life to the national stage at the Democratic National Convention. I am honored to be here today to share my leadership journey and the lessons learned along the way about audacity, accountability, and authenticity while moving forward in a time of resistance. I want to begin with a story I've never shared publicly before, but really breathes life into the purpose of this conference centered on how to unite, act, and rise. When I was notified that I was chosen to formally nominate Hillary Clinton for President of the United States at the Democratic National Convention, that was all I was told. I didn't know who the other speakers would be until the campaign sent out a press release an hour before nominations began. Only then did I learn that I would share the stage with legends and trailblazers. Senator Barbara Mikulski, our longest-serving woman in congressional history, and civil rights icon, Congressman John Lewis. But I had a personal history with one of the nominators that the campaign knew absolutely nothing about. And that made the moment so much more sweeter and so profoundly American. You see, as a bright-eyed college student, just trying to find my place in the world, I volunteered to be a part of Congressman John Lewis's re-election campaign. It was my first encounter with politics, and one that I will never forget. As I knocked on doors of people I'd never met, I made phone calls, I passed out flyers, and with the incredible optimism of youth, I gave my heart to fighting for social justice. Figuratively, I followed the congressman's footsteps into the battlefield of advocacy, policy, and politics. But I'd never imagined that one day we would share a national stage. But there was this moment. I was standing directly behind him, backstage. Both of us were preparing for our nomination speeches. And we could hear the roar of the crowd. And we could see just a small sliver of the audience from where we were standing. And we could feel the energy of the arena. And it was then that I suddenly realized I would literally follow the congressman's footsteps to formally nominate a woman I saw on TV at the age of 11, a woman who addressed a panel of men with such confidence and ownership of self that I was drawn into her words: healthcare, broken, reform. And that was when the full weight of history and our country's future crashed into me. I understood in that moment that it is individual people and collective effort that creates change, that inspires, that gives birth to ideas that make a difference. Generations ago, a young John Lewis marched across Peters Bridge to secure the right to vote for all Americans. Generations ago, Hillary Clinton redefined the role of a first lady by daring to propose meaningful healthcare reform. They planted seeds from the power of grassroots and from the power of government, so someday someone like me could come along and live more fully in the America that they helped create. Standing next to Congressman John Lewis to place Hillary's name in presidential nomination was more than just a surreal moment. It was a reflection of America's progress and of leadership. I shared the stage with a congressman who had his skull cracked with clubs while daring to demand the right to vote. And less than 100 years after the passage of the 19th Amendment, I voted for a woman who dared to break existing gender conventions and run for president. This story and the American history that made it possible illustrates three guiding principles of leadership: audacity, accountability, and authenticity. Audacity is being bold with disregard to conventional thought. It is daring to dream for a better future or a better you, and then having the intrepid boldness to work towards that vision. After 2 years in our nation's capital and political lessons learned, I knew it was time for me to move on. Complacency haunts me when the fire in my belly flickers into slow-burning embers. But I was stuck. I wasn't called back to Atlanta. I was called to New York. And although not yet ready to leave behind comfort and security, terrified, 5 years ago, I walked away from the only life I'd ever known and moved to New York City. I had no job. I knew absolutely nobody. And I was completely alone. But by stepping into audacity, I learned to be bravely bold, that yes is a powerful word, and to challenge my fears by sitting with them and asking 3 questions. Why have I created you? What do you have to teach me? And what lies on the other side of you? And I have found that the answers enrich my life beyond measure and have greatly influenced my own leadership journey. Too many people let fear of the unknown stop them from taking chances, but it is through risk that we reap our rewards. Moving to a new place, whether it's across the country or stepping outside of our comfort zone, is an experience that is both terrifying and exhilarating. I learned that by leaving my comfort zone, I experienced a new way of living, I found a sense of freedom, and I discovered a better version of me. The willingness to take risks by stepping outside of our comfort zone is the primary way by which we grow. But too often, we are afraid of taking that first step. The truth is, comfort zones are not even really about comfort. They're about fear. And while there is value in learning lessons from our fears, we must also recognize their limitations. Once we do, we learn to embrace the process of taking risks and growing in the process. My first night in New York City was one of my loneliest. But today, I am living my best life at the highest expression of self. I have carved out and claimed my space in a city of 9 million people, all because I dared to say yes to a vision that scared me. The first person you must lead is you. Be willing to step outside of what you know and explore the unknown. Be audacious enough to say yes and be bravely bold. Accountability. I joined the Army as an ammunition specialist 3 days after high school graduation. I was one of 4 women surrounded by 200 men, and I learned lessons about life and leadership I carry with me to this day. Chief among these lessons was that of accountability. In the military, accountability is the presence of trust because lives depend on keeping commitments. At a tender age, I learned the weight of this responsibility. Generations of military veterans have made life and death decisions in ambiguity under the most austere conditions and are still held accountable for their actions. For civilians, the idea of leadership basks in this glowing spotlight and is centered on accolades. But this is a skewed and dangerous perception of leadership. Accountability in leadership means you must accept responsibility for the outcomes delivered by you, both the successes and the failures. John F. Kennedy famously mused, "Victory has 100 fathers, but defeat is always an orphan." Accountability cannot be a stranger to leadership. We must view failure as a learning opportunity and not as a chance to deflect responsibility and place blame. In the Army, after every field exercise, as a team, we will conduct an after-action review, commonly referred to as an AAR. An after-action review is essentially a debriefing process to analyze what happened, why it happened, and how it can be done better. And while there are several stages in the AAR, key to this process is 1, a focus on results, 2, identifying ways to sustain what was done well, and 3, developing recommendations on ways to overcome obstacles. An AAR is a simple, powerful method for accountability and improvement. I learned that failure is a part of leadership, and oftentimes the root of success. With accountability, we will not always be successful, but we will know where we stand and begin to recover and move forward again. Authenticity. Authenticity is the quality of being real, the practice of being you, and how difficult it can be, and how brave it is to be who we truly are in a society that assaults us with messages that we are not enough. Authenticity means opening ourselves to our truth, and that requires the strength of vulnerability. It means giving up on this idea of being perfect and beginning the work of becoming you. The term authenticity comes from the Greek word author, which means you are the author of your life. And the question becomes, how do you want to write your story? Are your chapters written from a place of limitations and rules? Or do the words of your life story flow from a space and freedom of self? Leadership is often perceived as masculine because throughout history and due to patriarchy, men have traditionally held formal positions of leadership. And so there is this idea that leadership is supposed to adhere to the social construction of masculinity, authoritative, linear, and loud. And while leadership can certainly encompass all of those elements, understand that leadership is so much more. Leadership is a spectrum, and most importantly, leadership is you, rooted in authenticity. The first speech I ever delivered was a call to action encouraging women to run for office and to step into leadership roles. Separate from my fear of public speaking, rooted in a severe speech impediment as a child, and the anxiety of delivering my first speech, I was petrified because I had to take the stage right after keynote speaker, New York City public advocate, Letitia James. For those who may not know who she is the first woman of color elected to citywide office in the city of New York. And without question, she is a blazing inferno. She commands attention every time she walks into the room. She brings crowds to their feet every time she is behind the mic. And she leads unapologetically, breaking glass ceilings and creating paths along the way. How was I supposed to find my light and shine standing in her shadow? I felt so inadequate. But I learned an important lesson that day. When the time came for me to share my leadership journey with 1,000 women from across the nation, I showed up as myself. I may not be a blazing inferno, but I am a quiet fire, and that is enough. The power of vulnerability is what connects us. And so I showed my scars and shared lessons learned from my own crucibles. And in the end, I realized that the only shadow I was ever standing in was my own. Moving forward in a time of resistance requires us to unite, act, and rise. And in doing so, we must be audacious, accountable, and authentic. To unite, we must understand that what connects us runs far deeper than what divides us. Along my journey, I have called California, Texas, Georgia, DC, and New York home. And I know it is through our shared vision, grounded in mutual values, that we can begin to heal and build in this time of resistance. But vision is not enough, and we must do more than just resist. We must move forward. In troubled times such as this, we must act, and act not in a perpetual state of opposition, but act in ways that move us towards progress. And so, our time is now. We must rise to meet the challenge of our generation. We must organize, strategize, and step into our leadership. America is hurting, but America can also heal and once again become this shining light that guides us all towards freedom. Let us connect with one another and protect an America that has a place for everyone. It will not be easy. The journey towards progress is always long, painful, and full of challenges. But the new Leaders Council creates a space for us to build an arsenal of tools, skills, and networks to go forth and lead the way towards a promise of a more just America. Because Rome is burning, but with our collective efforts, the fire of destruction can be transformed to light the way towards a better America, a better world, and a better us. Now is our time. We the people includes us, women, immigrants, LGBTQ, Muslims, all of us. We are all part of the American story and have a right to pursue her promise. Now is our time. We are one nation, indivisible. And while the future may be uncertain, it is ours to seize, to create, and to build. Now is our time. I challenge each of you to rise up, to step boldly into your leadership and move us towards progress in a time of resistance. Because the only way is forward, and it begins with us. Now is our time to lead. Thank you.